action. I'm a man of many talents. I can knit. Just 2 sticks and a string.
This is knitting.
Okay, first of all, where are we?
Hi, Ed.
Okay.
I'm Linda Daniels, and you are now inside Northampton Wools.
Oh, well, that was my second question. Where are we? But who are you? So you answer, you see, you're ahead of me again. My feeling is this level of comfort and beauty that's in this shop is very personal for you.
It's extremely personal for me. This is my, I want to say, second home. And when people come in, I want them to feel like they're coming into my living room. So this is a space that brings me an incredible amount of joy. And like you said, we're surrounded by beauty, and I love every minute of being here.
Right. Well, that's a very lucky thing in the world we're in. Not a lot of people can say that about their work and their lives, about lucky and beauty, both at the same time. And I've often said art isn't art unless it has enough beauty. So your work is a lot to you. These are pieces of yours around. And so what, if you go back to the core of what it is that attracted you to do this? Did you remember how it happened, or does that get lost?
No, I will never forget how it happened, because although I learned to knit when I was about 12, I never really started to do much knitting or crocheting until I was an adult. I left my teaching job to have my children, but I wanted to still have some sort of income at home. And I ended up answering an ad in the paper for somebody to crochet at home. This woman in Amherst was what we call a production crocheter. She was making hats and scarves and selling them at fancy boutiques and markets. And so I began to work for her. After about a year and a half, she then put me in touch with a yarn sales rep who was writing a book, and I ended up knitting and crocheting sweaters for her book. That then led me to this store. This store was originally opened by another woman in 1981, and I wandered into the store and asked her if she was going to have somebody that I knew teach classes, and she said no. We became instant friends, and she asked me to teach classes. So I started to work in the store.
Okay, can I stop you for a second? Do you realize that you've left over when you realized that you were good at it? When did you decide? Because other people must have been deciding the same thing.
That's a little bit further on in the story, which is why I haven't covered it yet.
Because it really is remarkable how good you are at it. Now you're being internationally celebrated.
It is. It is one of those things where I always say I ended up here because I listened to where the universe was taking me. It is not, being a business person was not anywhere in my life plan. I didn't know anybody in business. No one in my family had any business background at all. Yet, once I started to work for the first owner, within a couple of years, I knew this was where I needed to be. I worked for her for about 6 years, and she then was done and wanted to sell the store. I was not in a position to buy it. We were too close. I couldn't negotiate, and I couldn't pay the price she was asking for it. My husband was on strike. He worked for the railroad, and we were selling our home to purchase my family home, basically. There were too many balls in the air. I couldn't do it. She ended up selling it to a woman who decided to buy it, who knew nothing about knitting, but her psychic told her she needed to get back in touch with the softer beauty side of her life. And this woman and Jacqueline were able to negotiate. She purchased the store, and she and I met, and I decided I could work for her, sort of be her manager. And from the moment that the store ownership changed hands, I basically was doing everything except writing the paychecks. And within 10 months, this woman came to me and said, it's clear that the energy from this place all belongs to you. You are Northampton Wools. At that time, my husband was back to work. We had sold our house and we didn't have a mortgage. And I was already working full time, so we were able to negotiate and I purchased it then. But during that time that I was working, I read every single book that came in the door, knitting book, and I just saw it. I knew that knitting was the thing I was supposed to be doing. It's almost like a talent. You are all of a sudden, playing the piano and didn't really know that you should be playing the piano. Well, that's what happened to me.
If you decide to come to the store, this kind of stuff is obvious. You'll understand that this woman, it is her store. But on the other hand, did you know a lot about the history of knitting and how big a thing it was worldwide for the last 5 centuries?
So at the time, there were 2 books that were published. One was by the Bishop of Rut, that is a complete sort of history of knitting. It's called The History of Knitting. And then there was another book published called A History of Knitting in America. So I don't know what you looked at, but there's a lot of knitting that's fairly recent. It's not older than 150 to 200 years old. And then there's ancient knitting. Right. They have found things in the tombs that were kind of created knit-like fabric. So it's got kind of a dual history. A lot of the knitting that people would recognize, like the Aran knitting that's all cables, typically from Ireland, or the Fair Isle knitting that's all different colors, those are relatively young types of knitting. And so knitting has sort of gone through over the ages being very popular and then not being very popular. I was just in Ireland for a week and a half, and these stories that we heard there from our tour guide and from a woman who's been in the knitting business for 86 plus years has said that knitting was always seen as something poor people did. If you didn't have any money, you needed to make your own clothes. And so the rich people got to go and buy them. So knitting has never had the same kind of feeling or respect, let's call it respect, that it deserves until very recently. Now it's very popular and we see it on the runways and there's a lot of respect around it. Right. It's seen more as an art form.
No, but that's how you explained your family's passion. You said, don't worry, it's going to be popular when I'm older.
I wish.
No, but you had to show a certain degree of confidence over the years because it can't have always been as successful as it.
You're absolutely right. We are in a wonderful place right now, but there have been many years of struggle, not the least of which, of course, was COVID. But when I first purchased the business, 6 months after I purchased it, we thought we were golden, and my husband was severely injured in a train accident and was no longer able to work. So 6 months after purchasing the store, we had to reverse roles. He was home with the kids and I was trying to make a living here. And that was not always easy, but we got through it. We did it. We raised 2 kids, sent one to college, and never looked back.
Let's stay with the store. At that point, the store is in jeopardy.
It was.
Okay. So do you remember what you decided you would focus on and how? Because now I know what you focus on. Making everybody happy. And you do it. So, but back then that wasn't going to be enough.
No, it was tough. Those were the days when I said, yes, if you walked in the door and said, I have a hole in my sweater, can you fix it? And I said, for $5, I can fix it. I would sell almost my children to make a buck.
I'm surprised you didn't mention yourself.
No, I never got that bad. Never got that bad.
Kids, get rid of them. You can have more. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to feel like you're on the fringe hanging on right now. What do you attribute that to?
So many things.
Not just your store,
no,
but
there's
in general.
Yeah. There are so many reasons for it. And I don't think I could pick any one thing and say this is what's led to the success, but I think that my knowledge, first of all, people appreciate that and value that. I think my friendliness, my warmth, my encouragement, my patience is the one thing that people always talk about. The other thing is I have a very wonderful, loyal customer base who have never let me down and continue to support us however they can. And the business has changed incredibly with the advent of the internet and YouTube and everything that comes along with the world that we live in now. It would not be here if it weren't for all of those kinds of things.
Here's what we really get lucky to do. We get to say what's good about the internet in that some way was good for you.
Yes.
Really? Because frankly, I'm in war with it most of the time because it's stolen our children.
Yes,
to some degree.
absolutely.
Okay. So this is exciting that did that for you.
So knitting has always been valued as or thought of as an oral kind of history. That this Irish woman said that she had hundreds of women knitting sweaters for her, not one of them used a set of directions or a pattern. They shared physically and verbally what they were doing to create the patterns. So it's always been that kind of craft, which is why you can get communities that do something one particular way and a state nearby where the stitch can be completely different. So it's a shared thing, which is where the internet has come in, because suddenly we are able to quickly share new ideas, new ways of doing things. I've been knitting professionally now for over 45 years, and it still amazes me that there are creative, intelligent, almost magic people out there finding another way to bind off, or another way to increase, or how to make this cable look better. It is an ongoing, lively, and alive craft.
It is that because on some level it's extraordinarily simple, isn't it? 2 sticks and a string.
2 sticks and a string.
Okay,
exactly.
so why, and if it weren't somehow fundamentally simple, then all of those things couldn't be shared.
You're absolutely right. No, so not everybody needs to know the answer to all of those questions. All you need, like you said, are 2 sticks and a string, and you can create a garment, a hat, a pair of socks. You don't need to know anything more than that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because, after all, this partly started about this hat made for me, which I'm wearing. But will show me. Well, wait.
There you go.
See this thing? Can you get this thing? People have stopped me on the street saying, "Nice hat." Now, they didn't say that to me before I had the hat. They didn't say, "Nice to you." They said, "Nice hat." So what I'm saying is sometimes when it's that successful, it reverberates to you, doesn't it? It comes back to you and says, I had, that satisfaction.
One of the things that I learned early on about myself was that I wasn't afraid to try anything. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I had no fear going in. And I did things like I worked for a fashion designer in New York City, and she would send me the specs, the drawing, basically, of what she wanted to create. She would send me the yarn, and it was up to me to create it. And that was one of the thrills of my professional career, was being invited to go to a runway show and see all of the garments that I created for her.
Really?
On the runway. So I wasn't stopped by, I can't do that. I was just like, how do I do that?
Well, you haven't really decided, well, I'm famous enough, I've done enough. You haven't been spoiled. There was an old line, will success spoil rock hunter? And I go way back, and I know my family didn't really, my mother sewed, she didn't knit, right? So we didn't have that in our family. But I asked sweaters to be made for me when I was a hippie.
Really?
Yeah. And people went, wow. So it's sort of in my blood, the beauty of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's always been a creative process. I've always enjoyed not just following directions, but being able to create it on my own and see where it takes me. I think I was also very open to whatever came my way. I was I can say yes.
I'm very happy with the way we're going here. Do you feel that a lot of people that come back and come back to other knitters as well in the swell, or are you really a unique thing going on here?
Are you asking me, like, is the store unique?
I just mean that we're deciding you're interesting. We did that, okay? But I'm saying that I don't know that this store and this kind of work is duplicated. There's a big yarn store not too far from here, but it's a different thing, isn't it?
This is, I would say that I am typical of what your small local yarn store would be. It's usually owner operated, so the owner of the store is in the shop. It's usually very customer based. And when people ask me about how I've managed to stay in business with the giant down the street, my answer is always this: they sell yarn and I sell knitting, because they're two very different things. And that's what you will find in most local yarn stores. You will have a different feel because each of us chooses different colors or different fibers or concentrates on different items. But the love of the craft is what really shows through, I think, in almost every store.
Okay, but here's the thing. We're going to take some pictures and show. This place has amazing numbers of choices just here, and you're displayed in a certain way. Do you want to pretend you're narrating your own movie right now and say, okay, if you're looking at that big wall, we will look at it. What are some of the ways you've decided to get this to go?
So it's both. That's again a little bit of both kind of things, because there are colors and fibers that I like, and there are colors and fibers that sell. And as the business owner, I need to find that balancing act between what do I really, really love and want to have in the shop, and what do I know my customers will really love and I need to have in the shop.
This is very fun to me. Think about that, because when you say, great, when somebody picks the wrong things.
Exactly.
But then do they come back and say, like I did with my hat, gee, how did you decide to do this? Did I butt in too much? I mean, the same thing has to be happening. Do they come back and say, gee, I wish I'd have bought the other one, and do they learn with you?
They do. And that's where trust comes in. They trust me to help guide them to what they need. And it's a lot of different things. Everybody, years ago they used to do your color palette for you. Right. So everybody has favorite colors, and looks good in certain colors. So we want to make sure that that's the number one thing. And then that's also the reason why we have so many different sweaters that are already knit. So you can come in and say, yeah, I love that, but let's try it on.
Beautiful one right there.
Let's see what it looks like when it's on you. I did.
And the one over your shoulder?
I designed both of these, okay. Yes.
So here's where I was going. So do you have a baseline thing that says, like, people tend to say, well, we don't like that plastic stuff, that polyester stuff. Do you have that going on in your bloodstream somewhere? Yeah,
and actually the first 6 years that I worked at Northampton Wools was when I really learned a lot about yarn and fiber and what the community wanted. We were in Northampton, and at that time, in the early 80s into almost 1990, people were very natural fiber conscious. We've moved back to that too. Right now, we're very natural fiber conscious. When Jacqueline first opened the store, she had a lot of acrylic, she had a lot of plastic, and within 3 months knew that it wasn't right, sold everything, and started again. Yeah, she really did.
And this is the one that bought the store that you bought from.
This was the original owner.
Oh, she's the original owner.
Yeah, had that happen. Yeah, and you sort of. There's nothing like natural fiber as far as I'm concerned. Wool is number one for me. But there are people that can't wear it or can't use it, number one. And fortunately, the majority of our customers love it. But also, the whole process of making yarn out of acrylic has changed, and it's gotten a lot better. So now we'll have a little more blends, and there are some acrylics that we will carry regularly. But that's the number one thing that we look at when I'm choosing yarns, is what is it made out of.
But then there's the secondary thing, which is something about my history of art that I understand a little bit. The colors don't always stay with the dyes they use and the wool is different and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
Do you want to get that deep into it so that when it comes in, you sniff it? You just go, wait, where did this come from? Exactly what kind of dye? So you want to get that deep in the stuff?
Not for every single yarn. I mean, we buy yarn from two different kind of manufacturers. There's what we call commercial yarn. So these are big mills. They're dyeing hundreds of skeins of yarn. They have a formula and they're perfect. They always come out the same.
Are they
and
mostly
then
the plastic plants?
not necessarily. No, not necessarily. There are some standard yarns that we carry in the store that are manufactured that way, and that's typical. That would be the normal thing that you've seen going on forever and ever and ever. But now hand dyers have really come into their moment. There were not even these number of small individuals dying in their backyard who are now selling out. They love the process. They dye the yarn. They put it online, and it's gone.
I'm just going to say I'm a little skeptical. I'd love to just buy everything you say, but that would be like the breweries now to come up, these little breweries, and they say my beer is better
It's
than anybody.
exactly.
But the thing is about that is that you can go and get the hops and things. Those people, what do they have? Their own sheep?
Not necessarily, no. You can
and
buy.
What are they feeding the sheep? And where do
Yes.
they allow them to play?
Yes.
I'm saying that's
It
why,
can get that deep.
That's why I wondered if you really wanted to get that deep.
It can get that deep, and we seem to be moving in that direction a little bit more. There's something called museling free sheep. It's a way of shearing the sheep that takes into consideration their health and well-being. There's organic. It's where are they eating, what are they eating, and how is the yarn being processed.
I covered. So it seems like we've just lost it here. That we've gone over the edge talking about what are we feeding the sheep. I don't blame you because I'm having a little problem myself. Okay, really.
It really does.
like
Now
that.
it's beginning to be more and more like that. We just had the trade show in Chicago, which I wasn't able to go to this year, but I am hearing from other shop owners that a lot of the manufacturers are talking about where did these sheep come from, where did this fleece come from, and how is it? How is it processed?
To say I made it up, and she doesn't. So I guess she means it. I'm really shocked because I didn't expect to be talking about this. I expect, I actually have only a certain amount of affection for these people that say my beer better than your beer, or my vodka, which if you taste, you can't tell the difference. So I'm asking you a specific thing. Do you feel like if somebody came in and said, here's my wool, and here's what I did, that you could tell something just from the feel? And
Absolutely. No, I can't tell if it's like
what they ate.
Exactly.
Okay. But you really do.
But I can tell how it's been processed. I can tell what kind of dye they might have used. Like not necessarily a name brand, but was this quality or is this, Kool-Aid?
Have you ever? Kool-Aid? She's deep. The thing is, though, I'm worried about that you can't know whether the dye is going to have a year life or a 10-year life, can you?
I don't think you can know by seeing at it. And so here are some of the things that we hear. From a regular mill that's standard, been dyeing forever and ever, the quality...
Mills have been dying.
Yeah, exactly.
Churches are dying. The mills are fine.
Sorry, they have been dyeing yarn forever. And they tend to be color fast, so they don't bleed when you wash them, and the color lasts through many launderings, let's say, or dry cleaning, whatever you choose to do. Hand dyers tend to be the yarns that bleed. You can buy a hand-dyed yarn, and maybe there's more of a color in it than... Not that they need a lot of dye sometimes to take the color the way they want it. Right. There can be some runoff when you put it in a bath of water and you see dye floating around. Or, we've also had this experience, knitters are often now knitting with bamboo needles, and if it's a heavy dye, it will stain the knitting needles as well. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you better be careful when you wash
I
it.
got an idea for you. Somebody comes in and says, here's, my own little abrasive, say, fine. And you put a little hot water on a stove and you throw it in. Because she's just saying, excuse me, it's nothing personal. I just need to know what in other words, do you really feel that there is a testing period if somebody came in and you wouldn't be sure where it came from?
You mean as far as testing, my customers testing it?
Making sure that,
Yeah.
Okay, do you ever give somebody some say, I really like this stuff, but...
Yeah.
What would be a but if you said?
The but is the color came off on the needles, number one. Number two, there were lots of knots in that skein. The ends tied together. That is a very bad thing. It's a very bad thing. So it can happen in a number of ways. If a mill is running to make a skein of yarn, the yarn breaks, and they tie it together and keep on going until they've hit the size of the skein that they need it to be.
So the question is, how often does it break?
Hopefully not at all.
Well, of course, but they might live one or two by, but if they had...
And most knitters would put up with one or two, but once you go past two, there's been a problem.
Okay, so what do? You're knitting a sweater, and all of a sudden you come up with a knot.
You cut it out. You reattach the yarn.
You reattach in this so special, graceful
in a very special way. You do. There are no knots in knitting.
Is that actually a line?
That is actually a line. Nope, that's actually a saying. There are no knots in knitting.
Oh, well, okay.
So when you do the same thing. When you move from skein to skein, you've used up one ball of yarn and you need to attach another. You have to attach it, but you do not knot it.
What do you do?
Well, you can work. It's a whole process.
Well, yes.
You can work the next couple of stitches with the two ends held together. You can do what we call a Russian join. You can do a spit join.
I was just going to say spit. You stole my line. I was going to say, what do you, spit on it?
Yes, you
do. I was supposed to get a laugh, but you said you're just that way. I can't get ahead of this woman. Are you okay with me doing this with her? She's way out there. But I do love the idea that these things are in the day-to-day texture.
They are.
Because we really, people can find out the history of knitting. What they can't find out is your history, right? So we'll ignore the fact that I went back and did the idea that there were really periods of time where most clothing was being knit.
Of course, I mean, look at the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. That's one of the things that we have talk about it all the time. Martha Washington was responsible for a slew of knitters who were making socks for George's army. And that was all they got.
And the people were told, go home and knit and help us put uniforms and warm and socks and all that stuff.
Right up through World War II.
Right through World War II, right? But they were, listen, I don't know that this is even possible, but do you think George Washington, rode around in a knit jacket?
No. He rode around in a woven jacket.
Okay, the woven jacket, though, was that there were looms and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And the way I'm going with this conversation, see, sometimes I know what happened, which is that there was a time where the whole knitting thing was endangered by machines.
Absolutely. You can look at the history of sock knitting. In England, there were groups. The real word is escaping my head right now.
Circular,
there were groups of hand knitters that created socks, and Queen Elizabeth I was responsible for keeping the hand knitting sock makers working, because at the same time, a man, of course, invented a sock knitting machine. And she wouldn't give it a patent and wouldn't let it be made because it would have put everybody out of work.
Excuse me again, she's stealing my stuff. That was one of the few things in history that I knew and read about a refusal to give a patent. Right?
Yes.
It was the Queen.
It was the Queen.
That's how important knitting was then.
Yeah.
So that guy went to France, right?
Yeah.
And then he did a big thing over there.
Mm-hmm.
The French, they're easygoing, those French.
They don't care.
They certainly care about the English.
They just want the sock.
And they're that way, kind of that way as long as it looks right. But I'm very fascinated by the idea that you share, like it's open source software or something. You feel that still,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like walking on a fence. There's there's a big group, online group called Ravelry. It's like a Facebook for knitters. There are over 10 million subscribers now, and that has been, it's the number one place people who knit or crochet go now for information and patterns and things like that.
Okay.
But the internet has also meant that it true to human nature, everybody wants to own it. Everybody wants to say, I invented this.
Sure.
And that's not true. There's very little that's new as far as, I mean, we all basically have the same shape. You're creating a front to back and 2 sleeves, and you're putting it together. And people are really very, very ownership conscious. They want to feel like that's my design and nobody else better do it. Well, my feeling and the truth is, like I said, it's all basically the same shape and it's all basically math. You create these things with math. If everybody is doing the same sweater, the same size, with the same math, you end up with the same thing.
That's right.
It doesn't belong to you, and it doesn't belong to you because it's math.
I see. That's one way to look at it. I was looking at it differently, which is inevitably you use a slightly different kind of stick. You use a different string, even if you're using the same pattern.
Yeah.
And then even in the speed and the tension and the whole thing, it does become personal.
It does.
And if you want that, you know, that industrial line, but
it does.
It is personal, isn't it?
There is, I mean, that's one side of it. The design side, the pattern writing side, the selling of patterns.
Right.
The creativity is out there. Everybody approaches creativity in their own way. They're inspired by different things. It comes out in different ways. And when you are creating a fabric, when you're knitting a fabric, I may have done all the math for this, but if you knit it, it's going to have your stuff
If
in
God
there.
knows I could do it.
If you could do it.
Okay, I want to step right into the next thing. So you have done 2 books that we have here, so we'll be shameless about showing them.
Absolutely.
Because first of all, who knows going to see this thing we're doing? You know, we don't know. But here's a book. Try to turn it away from the window there.
Oops.
Okay, so what did you have in mind when you did this one?
Okay, this is another one of those, I didn't ever think this was going to happen. Not even did I not ever think it was going to happen. I never had a dream of doing this book, but this is what happened. I was fortunate enough to be asked to knit some sweaters for the movie Cider Rules. And that was another...
That's Hollywood, by the way.
Yeah, it was definitely Hollywood. And the biggest thrill there were 2, was seeing Michael Caine accept the Oscar for his role, while splashed on the screen behind him was a still of him wearing the vest that I knit for the movie.
Really?
That was really
And there
fun.
wasn't a red arrow pointing.
Nobody
at you
put my
going,
name on it. No.
Hey,
No.
but that's
This,
nice to
the
know.
second half
A
of
lot
that was,
satisfaction
yes,
with that.
definitely.
Yeah.
It was filmed here, and so a lot of local people were in the movie or involved in the movie, and it opened at Pleasant Street Video Theater, which is now a bar. But my husband and I were in my shop, which was down the street at the time, on opening night, and we were waiting, and there was a line forming to go into the theater. And when it was time to go in, I opened the door, and boom, the local television news lights came on, and they wanted to interview me as we walked
Come on, they were just
down.
waiting for you to
They
come
were
in.
waiting for me to come up. That was another big
So
kind
now
of
you'd be
thrill.
comfortable going to Hollywood. They have those lines. You could just fit right
Well, I'll
in.
be comfortable taking an Oscar, but
Yeah. Hey, we're going to show something.
yeah. So this sweater.
Okay.
So because I did the sweaters for the movie,
Yeah, it's-
like that,
it's okay.
like
Yeah,
that.
it's better.
This actually is a design that I did for Charlize Theron, and she wears it in the movie, and it is
in case you
just a picture. She wears it in a photograph. Okay. That's what led to the book, because all of a sudden there were 3 yarn companies whose yarn I used, so we were helping promote them. I had the designs because I wrote what I did, and a magazine. I was friends with the friend of a magazine editor. They wanted to publish the designs in the magazine, which then led to a little publishing company up in Vermont saying, well, let's do a book.
really?
And so
Just like that.
just like that. So we put the book together.
So you've got this book in a few Beverly Hills houses, things like that.
Well, I know of one.
That'll do. That'll do. But wait a minute, you have another book. Let's not fail
And
to.
so then suddenly I was a name. And this book is a collection of designs from local yarn stores across the America. This says Knitter Stash
that's
patterns
sort of
from
the way that you're
exactly.
Yeah.
And so they called and asked if I would submit a couple of
same
designs for this.
publishing company?
Not the same publishing company. This
Where were
was
they when they,
I know.
they were in on the ground floor of this.
they
great
were
thing.
first. Yes. Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm really happy with that, but it did lead to you doing some significant pieces for
That's really
well-known people.
Yes, that's really when I became what I would call a designer. I had written a lot of patterns up to then. Almost every shop owner does, because somebody comes in and says, I want this, and it doesn't exist, and so we create it. But when all of this started to happen, then I was also hired to do a sweater for Halle Berry in Perfect Stranger, and began to work for a specific yarn company, doing some designs for them. They are now out of business.
Halle Berry's pretty good.
And Halle Berry was pretty good. Whoa!
Wow, I kicked the wire. That's where you got to stop it. Okay, let's get that straight. Yeah, I had that wrapped around, but I just turned around to think, okay, how are we doing? We're doing that well. Okay, so I want to make sure that we finish this section. Maybe we can do some more with some friends of yours. But let's talk about, you're now known enough that you got invited out to some other places around the world, and you're going. And you had a fashion shoot here, which
Yes,
I did a couple stills of. So tell us what that means to you and what differences. Let's just put a little bit of a broader eye on, what do you find out when you go to a thing like that, and
So I feel like there are like 5 questions in that
Good.
in that
then I can relax.
in that thing. So I'm now working for Plymouth Yarn, and they are about to celebrate their 75th anniversary. And by working for them, I mean I'm designing for them. And their 75th, it's their diamond anniversary, and they asked me to create 10 designs for this special anniversary, which they just released yesterday. So that's been very exciting to see that come to fruition. But I've also been asked to teach at the watermill in Pescara, Italy, next year. And before it's even actually fully posted on their website, I'm sold out. So we already have
Domestically or internationally?
here.
Yeah, here.
People who know me want to take
they're
and
already
everybody's
signed up for
they're already signed up for Italy.
I guess so. That's great. That must give you as much satisfaction as doing the work. That many people, because it wasn't just 5 people.
No, it was 18.
18.
They're limited by the number of people they can fit around their dining room table, because it's a very small villa.
Really?
But they specialize in painting and in knitting classes. So they have all these different weeks. But it was a real thrill to be invited to that. Now they found out, or they invited me, because I have customers who went 2 years ago and were not that happy with their teacher, and wrote to them and said, you really need to ask Linda at Northampton Wools to come and teach. And so
isn't it 2 things? One's some people can do and they can't teach.
oh, that's so true. That is also very much you can have the world's best designer and she cannot teach. He cannot teach at all. So that's where my background, I have a degree in special education.
Well, the knitters can be all kinds of people.
Exactly.
That's for sure. Well, right now, let's just say, other than all of your traveling and stuff, is there a creative direction that you're focusing on for your own satisfaction? Is it bigger pieces, smaller, more scarves, more gloves? By the way, you make gloves.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. That's kind of like asking me, do I have a favorite yarn? So the answer is no. I do what I need to do, or what I feel like doing. What's the next thing? Right. Sometimes it can be a new yarn comes in that I've ordered, and I need to sell it. So I need to inspire my customers. So that little vest over there is my newest creation to help sell that yarn. So that's a lot of times where my creativity has to come from.
Try not to drip on the wire.
Yeah, don't.
I want you to just be able to show that for me. Let's see.
Yeah.
Back to go. You can talk while I'm
So a lot of times it's not so much what do I want to do as what do I need to do. But when I get overwhelmed or come close to feeling like I can't do another freaking thing, that's when I back up and make it for me. Because I'm never tired of knitting. It's never the thing that I don't want to do. But the knitting for the store or other people, that's the thing that can burn me out.
Burn you out. But guess what? You weren't burned out doing this one. And I think if there's the one thing that made me so surprised, because that you would actually go ahead and easily do it. And when I wasn't particularly happy with what we were getting, I'd say, what about this? You never acted like, you pain and how can you, don't you see how good it is? Are you?
For example,
with you, just another man with a problem. I wish I hadn't known, but instead she says, oh yeah, we did that.
This is a good example of me saying, yeah, I didn't have the exact specifications in front of me, and I thought that the stripe was wider than it actually is.
Remember exactly.
Yes, right, and okay. I was like, okay, Ed.
And that's really nice.
It's still a hat.
Can you leave it on? I'll tell you what I think. I think that we've probably done a half an hour. We'll have to cut it up, right? But I think we ought to say there are going to be 10 episodes, okay? We don't know exactly what they're all going to be, but they're going to be one of this and one of that. But this is the first one, so let's not make it so long people don't remember how great it was. Let's just say it was great for me, and I hope for you too, and for anybody who watches it.
Absolutely.
It's very ambitious, but let's be ambitious.
That is definitely what I want.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Selena!